Welcome to the Sentinel Global Affairs, where we decode the hidden dimensions of global geopolitics. Tap like and subscribe to stay ahead of the curve. Chapter 1. Weaponization of Trade and Tariff. Today, we examine a fundamental shift in American foreign policy, how a simple tariff evolved into an economic weapon and foreign policy tool. This transformation was most visible under President Donald J. Trump. Trade moved from commerce into national security and geopolitical leverage. It became a story of power, pressure, and changing rules. Rather than rely on multilateral forums, the U.S. acted directly and unilaterally. If a nation was deemed unfair, tariffs imposed immediate pain. Shockwaves hit supply chains and diplomatic channels. At home, tariffs were sold as protection for workers and industry, particularly against China, accused of unfair trade practices. Abroad, tariffs sought concessions and behavior change. The message: access to the U.S. market is a privilege, not a right. A stark turn from the old belief that interdependence preserved peace. A tariff war recast trade as an economic weapon, an enduring foreign policy tool. And nowhere was this clearer than in the U.S.-China confrontation to come. Chapter 2. The U.S.-China Trade War and the Technology Cold War. Two entwined economies: supply chains, investment, and debt. Washington cited IP theft, forced transfers, and state subsidies. In 2018, a tit-for-tat tariff battle began. Steel, aluminum, electronics, machinery, sweeping lists. Beijing hit U.S. agriculture to create political pain. The aim: disrupt China's state-led industrial ascent, including high-tech ambitions. Tariffs morphed into export controls, toward a technology Cold War. Chinese tech giants faced entity list bans, strangling access to chips and software, justified as national security against espionage risks. Allies were pressed to exclude suspect 5G vendors, dividing capitals. Restricting components and market access became leverage to preserve tech primacy. This was the opening battle in a long-term strategic competition. Chapter 3. The Trump-Modi dynamic and the ceasefire claim. Warm optics masked growing economic friction. The weaponization of trade did not spare friends. Disputes over tariffs on almonds and iconic motorbikes. U.S. revoked India's GSP. New Delhi retaliated. Low-grade conflict amid defense cooperation. Ceasefire signals rarely became deals, posturing over resolution. Chapter 4. Tariffs, rare earth minerals, and India's strategic resilience. 17 elements: power turbines, EVs, defense systems, and smartphone displays. Global processing relied overwhelmingly on China, an exposed choke point. The trade war surfaced the national security stakes of critical minerals. Hints of export curbs threatened to cripple high-tech supply chains. Washington pushed domestic mining processing as security policy. Companies diversified sourcing beyond China. India eyed deposits and capacity, boosting strategic value. Resilience became core doctrine, reliability over cheapest cost. Chapter 5. Russia, Europe, and the global ripple effect. U.S. tariffs hit steel and aluminum from key allies under a security clause. Allies struck back. Iconic American goods in the crosshairs. Friction inside NATO and the G7 undermined unity. Europe accelerated strategic autonomy and diversified ties. Rivals benefited from Western discord. Smaller economies faced costly reroutes and uncertainty. Rules-based trade slid into flux and fragmentation. Others deepened ties, realigning commerce and diplomacy. Tariff power is potent, but carries unintended consequences. Chapter 6. Conclusion. Trade as the new geopolitical weapon. Tariffs have left an indelible mark on international relations. Trade now sits alongside diplomacy, intelligence, and military power. Once protective, tariffs became coercive and fast-acting. Threats alone often compelled negotiations and concessions, but instability, higher prices, and supply disruptions mounted. Allied trust eroded, weakening traditional pillars of influence. Partners built resilience, formed new blocs, and weaponized resources. Control over rare earths became strategic leverage. Trade policy is now security policy. Nations must map vulnerabilities and diversify to mitigate risk. The genie of weaponized trade is out and unlikely to return. Leaders must balance tactical gains against strategic fragmentation. The world is watching this economic weapon-shaped geopolitics. There are decades where nothing happens and are days when decades happen. Subscribe to the Sentinel Global Affairs, decoding power, trade, and strategy.